my now 20-year-old was I remember when she was 3, we weren't reading, we were watching Winnie the Pooh. And it got to the point where Winnie the Pooh is stuck in the honey tree and she started sobbing. Like, really. And I thought, oh, this child. And then she ended up becoming the kid that really loves the fairy tales, really loves the fantasy, that even that scary, creepy stuff that comes up in all those fantasy novels. She could handle it. And I don't know. And then now my youngest are 10-year-old twins. They're more sensitive, I think, to like emotional. I don't know the words I'm trying to find to describe them, except that as their mother, I choose books differently for them than I did for their older brother, kind of depending on the kid.
Yeah, we have a child who's quite sensitive and kind of takes on what he's reading. I remember as a child watching a movie about Jack and the Beanstalk, which terrified me. And I somehow still believe that if I was to find this kid's movie, it would be equally terrifying. I know it couldn't possibly be terrifying, but there was something about it that just really got in.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times I think actually the fairy tales work because there is that sort of element of like, it's the realistic stories that can be really, at least for me as a kid, the realistic stories. Kidnapping sounded a lot more scary than like a dragon because that could really happen. You know what I mean? Like there was a different, we could get into that.
I get it.
Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah. We had a child who heard the Amber Alert on our bloody phones and asked what that meant. And I think someone explained it to him in the most banal way possible. And he was up for a night or two.
If I can just jump in for a second, that reminds me that, have you read The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom?
I've read very few books.
Okay. The Hiding Place is this beautiful, she was I think it was Danish, right? Or Polish. Daughter of a watchmaker during the Holocaust. And this is her memoir, basically. The Rabbit Room just did this beautiful film adaptation of The Hiding Place. Anyway, in this story, she is recounting when she was young and she asked her father about some grown-up thing. And he, instead of answering her, asked her to pick up a suitcase that was full of like watch parts and really heavy bits. And so she tries to pick it up and she's like, I can't, it's too heavy. And he said, that's right. And I would be a poor father if I asked you to carry that heavy suitcase a long way. And it's the same way with knowledge, that I'm going to carry things. I'm not getting this as eloquently as she says in the book, but basically part of his duty as a father then is to carry those heavy bits until she's old enough and strong enough to bear it. Right. And to me, this feels like one of those things that why we read aloud. We read aloud because every time our kids encounter a story, they are reading about a hero who has to overcome obstacles against usually insurmountable odds, right? So they're bearing witness again and again and again to these people, or creatures, right? These heroes having to overcome obstacles, and they see that it can be done. So they're bearing witness. And then they're also walking a mile in the shoes of another, but they're doing it through story, which feels a lot safer than a lot of the other ways that our kids encounter the evils and ugliness of the world, which is all very real, right?
I remember Peter Crave said that every book has a setup, an upset, and a reset. Isn't that nice?
Oh, that is nice. I have not heard that before. Yes.
What's your favorite book?
Oh gosh, that's such an impossible question.
No, it's not. Answer it. You have one book you can read for the rest of your life, not including the Bible. You've got to pick one before you leave this studio.
Can I put a whole bunch of books in one volume?
No.
Okay, my own personal favorite. This would not be like the one book I would want to read over and over and over again. But the one that comes to mind for me is Anne of Green Gables. I love these books so much.
My beautiful wife plays Anne of Green Gables for the kids who love it. I love that my wife has this like conversation with the kids about the characters. I've never read it, so that's lovely.
Yeah.
I'll let you, in a minute, we'll swap because I'd love to hear you chat too. Yeah.
Fun.
Okay, Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah.
All right.
But as far as read alouds, like fantasy ends up being usually my kids' favorites.
Yeah.
This is so interesting because I asked each of my 3 adult kids recently, just like, can you tell me what you loved about homeschooling? or some happy memory you have of homeschooling. And they all named books separately. They all named books, which I was like, that's so interesting. We did a lot of other things, but that's what they remember. And I think it's the fantasy novels that tended to stick with them. The Hobbit, The Green Ember by S.D. Smith, I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, good books coming out.
Yeah, good books coming out. They're a little bit harder to find, but it's really important that we keep making them. Yeah. And I think there is this tendency, especially among homeschooling families, especially amongst Catholic families, to prioritize the old classics over everything else. But if they had done that in Lewis and Tolkien's time, we wouldn't have those books. We still need to be making really good stories, timeless stories that are inspiring to the imagination and that help cultivate that Catholic imagination in our children. So S.D. Smith's The Green Ember series is another one, and the Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson is another fabulous fantasy series that kind of sweeps you away in a Lord of the Rings Tolkien-esque kind of a way.
I didn't read a book till I was 17, I don't think.
Is that right?
Yeah, I read like a choose your own adventure book.
Yeah.
So 5 pages and I was dead. Yes. Or I may have read, bits and pieces, but I never picked up a book and said, I'm going to read this book until after my conversion when I was 17. I think one of the first books I read was The Joy of St. Francis. And then I read a lot of philosophy and theology. And then it was my pride that led me to love Dostoevsky, right?
Okay.
So, and I've said this before, I wanted to be the kind of person that liked Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
So it was complete vanity.
Yeah.
And then
which is a motivator for a lot of us, for a lot of things.
I'm a big fan of allowing our lesser sins to truncate the big ones.
To help us grow in virtue in some way.
I think so. I think that could be possible. So, but yeah, I fell in love with the brothers, and I actually just really did fall in love with it. But then there's other books I'll pick up and people assure me they're great. And I don't know. I read I got about 3 or 4 books that I circle through, and that's it.
Well, isn't that interesting though? We do have this tendency to think we'll get asked a lot at Read Aloud Revival for book recommendations. That's what we do, right? We give book recommendations. But a lot of times sometimes I think those questions come out of I don't know how to pick good books. Well, yes, you do. Just like you and I probably have different taste in food. We probably order 2 different things off a menu. Yeah. And so that's one of the wonderful things is that you're allowed to not like books that other people love. There are plenty of classics or books that...
Give us one.
Yeah, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I will say Little Britches is a whole series that homeschoolers love. And man, I thought reading that book aloud was going to kill me. Every single book, I was like, this is just not my thing. Yeah. I mean... And I could spend some time trying to figure out why, or I could just find something that is more enjoyable for me to read aloud and then put that one on audio for my kids.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.